Hey, what is up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi here bringing you all another Market Watch episode. So this video is kind of a follow-up to the last Market Watch episode that we posted on the weekend, where we are continuing to talk about meta techs and trends. The top 16 deck lists from the LCS event were finally revealed, and while there isn't a huge sample size there, they do give us a bit of an idea of what we should be expecting moving forward. With no showings from Dragon Link or Noble Knights, which were just hit on the ban list, we saw a ton of Virtual World, Eldritch, and Drytron decks, and while maybe some people expected the first couple, Drytrons I think caught a lot of people off guard as a relatively new deck. So today we are going to take a look at the cards that are now trending because they were played in those successful decks, either as techs for the strategies themselves or ways to counter other meta decks. Let's get started. First up, let's take a look at Chaofeng, Phantom of the Yang Zing. Now this is a generic level 9 synchro monster that was played in 3 of the 6 top 16 Virtual World deck lists from the LCS, including the build that took first place. This card allows you to fetch a tuner monster when it's destroyed, allowing you to fetch Lao Lao directly out of your deck. Lao Lao can then be used to make Cloud Castle, which can revive Chaofeng and allow you to go into True King of all Calamities. This is a pretty interesting line of play. I think that before, Virtual Worlds would have to dump the Roshi, then summon Vermilion Dragon Mech, banish the Lao Lao to pop the Vermilion Dragon Mech itself, then Vermilion Dragon would add the banished Lao Lao back to your hand. I'm not like extremely familiar with the deck, but they're both definitely options for the Virtual World strategy. I just feel like with Vermilion Dragon, you can also have the utility to get rid of your opponent's cards, so if your extra deck space is a little bit too tight, I don't know if Chaofeng is worth the slot. Also with Chaofeng, you do have to pop it with Chuchi, so it might be a bit difficult to get enough banished cards to pop Chaofeng and still keep that interruption with Chuchi for your opponent's following turn. Anyways, Chaofeng only has one printing as a super rare from back in Crossed Souls, so while it was only $2 a couple of weeks ago, it did go as high as up to $25 each, but has now cooled off a bit back down to the $15 mark. Given that it's not an extra deck staple the way that other Virtual World extra deck options are, I do think it's likely that we're going to see this card cool off a bit more, maybe down to around the $8 to $10 mark is a realistic expectation. It's definitely something that I think a lot of you will probably have lying around in your bulk at home, so now is a great time to dig them up and offload them at their hyped up prices. The next card we're looking at here is the Herald of Purple Light. This card is really similar to the Herald of Orange Light that we talked about last week, but instead of negating a monster effect, you can use Purple Light to negate a trap card instead. Right now, we are in a much slower format, so there are some trap heavy strategies running around in the game at the moment, and you can use this to hit cards like Ice Dragon's Prison or Torrential Tribute. However, even if you are going first, it can potentially be really important to help play through Infinite Impermanence. Anyways, this card is another piece that is searchable off of Ava or Benton, so if you're running this particular Drytron build, then maybe Purple Light is a card that you would want to play. Notably, however, it is just a 1 of rather than a 3 of the way that Orange Light is. Now because of that, we haven't seen too much of a spike in the prices of the lower rarity printings of Purple Light, with really only the Shatter Foil being noteworthy at $1 or $2 a piece. However, the ultimate rare version of this card came in a core set, unlike Orange Light, which is from an OTS tournament pack. Now ultimate rare Purple Lights came out way back in Enemy of Justice, so they are quite hard to come across, and now currently sit $60 each, lowest on TCG Player at the moment. As just a situational 1 of, I personally would be trying to offload this card as quickly as possible and just accept playing a lower rarity alternative. Even though this card is hyped up now, it probably won't be seeing play in other strategies and will fall in price very quickly when Drytron does rotate out of the format. Alright, so speaking of Drytrons, next up we have Cyber Angel Natasha. This card is a level 5 ritual monster, and it was actually played in both of the Drytron decks that made top 16 at the LCS event. This card is actually really ridiculous. Basically, while it's in the graveyard, you can banish another Cyber Angel monster from your graveyard to summon this card out and steal an opponent's monster. And as if that wasn't crazy enough, this effect isn't once per turn, so you could continuously keep on stealing monsters as long as you have enough Bentons to banish from your graveyard, since you could just link away the Natasha and summon it back out. Now, a word of warning, you do have to properly ritual summon this card first, but it's searchable off of Benton, and you can ritual summon it fairly easily, so that shouldn't be a problem. Now, this card is just a one of, but unfortunately it only has one printing from way back in Raging Tempest. Fortunately, this was a set where every single pack had a holo, and Raging Tempest was fairly popular because it's where Zodiacs debuted, so there should be quite a few running around on the market. But as an older card, it might be a bit harder to find someone who actually has extra copies of this card in their binders and knows where it is. It's definitely the type of card you want to dig out of your bulk and try to offload where you can, and at only a couple of bucks, definitely something that you should try to pick up soon if you're wanting to play the Drytron deck. Next up is a card that is really quickly disappearing off of the market. We have Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion. Specifically, we're looking here at the original secret rare printing from Flames of Destruction. I feel like this card is one of the forgotten about hand traps because it can be overlooked often in favor of cards like DD Crow or Skullmeister. However, Ghost Belle did see a fair amount of play at the LCS this weekend, seeing usage both in the main and side deck. Now, interestingly enough, this card is pretty useful against a lot of different meta decks this format, as you can use it to stop cards like Cloud Castle or Roshi against the Virtual World deck, Chaconine against Zodiacs, Scarlet Sanguine against Eldritch, and basically anything that summons out of the graveyard in Drytrons. Now, in this case, it's just the secret rares that have spiked up in price, as we are seeing the first editions now over the $20 mark, and the unlimiteds up at around $15 to $17. Of course, this is a trend that we should expect to see from the original secret rare Ghost Girl hand traps, as cards like Ash Blossom and Ghost Ogre are quite expensive for their original secret rare versions as well, despite all of the Ghost Girls receiving multiple reprints. If for whatever reason you don't have access to this card already, this card is extremely affordable if you get the reprints from Maximum Gold or Dual Devastator, which you should still be able to pick up for less than $1 each. We're looking at this more because if you're the type of person who likes to bling out your decks with cards in the highest possible rarity, you might want to pick up your secret rare copies of Ghost Belle fairly soon before they follow the other two main Ghost Girls over the $40 mark. Alright, next we're on to looking at Downerd Magician. We are looking at this card because it was played in the Drytron deck over the weekend as a card that helps get materials underneath AA Zeus. The Drytron main deck is full of level 1 monsters, and if you aren't using them as ritual or link materials, you can actually overlay them. One of the options available is Lyrilusk Assembled Nightingale, a generic rank 1 monster that can attack your opponent directly. This makes it incredibly easy to meet the requirement to put Zeus on top of it, but because you don't need to detach a material to attack directly, you can go into Downerd Magician before going into Zeus. This allows you to get 4 materials under Zeus instead of 3, so you can use its effect twice without having to rely on something else being destroyed in order to get that 4th material. I believe that before, we used to put Downerd on top of Dante in Burning Abyss, though I don't know for sure if Burning Abyss Phantom Knight is going to be playing this card at all, even with the new support. Anyways, with Downerd, we are looking at a couple of pricier secret rare printings, with the originals from Legacy of the Valiant up at the $10 mark each, and the Megaton reprints up at $5, which is a fair amount for a card that was only $1 or $2 for the longest time. We do also want to keep in mind that there is a gold rare version that is available for $1 or $2, so there is that budget option as well. Honestly, I'm going to actually recommend picking up a copy of this card if you can fairly soon, depending on the rarity and what you feel comfortable with paying for it. As long as Zeus is in the game, I think that this card has the potential to see play as an extra option to get that extra material, so I think it's something that you'll want to have available. The safest bet at least would be to at least grab a gold rare copy soon, just in case this card doesn't fall on Konami's reprint radar and we see another deck try to make use of it. Okay, so this is kind of a weird one. Let's take a look at Herald of Ultimateness really briefly. So in the 2 Drytron decks that topped, neither of them actually played Herald of Perfection, but one of them did play Herald of Ultimateness, which is pretty cool. The idea with Drytrons is that you tribute attack points instead of levels. So to summon Herald of Ultimateness, you just need to tribute monsters with 2,000 attack points to bring it out, rather than a total level of 12. This is pretty cool and actually works out quite well for Drytrons, as their level 1 main deck monsters all have 2,000 attack points, so you can bring this card out fairly easily. Herald of Ultimateness also has the added benefit of being able to negate special summons by discarding a fairy monster, in addition to the negation of spells, traps, and monster effects that you would get from Herald of Perfection, so that's really cool. The only real downside here, I think, is that you can't search this and Dawn of the Herald with pre-preparation of rites, but I don't think you want to play those cards anyways while you have the Drytron Ritual spell available. Anyways, this card did only have 2 printings before, with the original from New Challengers being about $7 and the Megaton reprints being about $3 to $4. Nothing too crazy though, because we did happen to also get a reprint of this card in Genesis Impact itself as a rare, which you should be able to pick up for only $0.25 or so. This card is just a one of it's looking like right now, and it looks like the Drytron deck is actually shifting away from playing either of the Heralds, so I would definitely go ahead and look at moving the holo versions if you happen to have some sitting around, and just playing with the rares for now. Another card that we can take a look at here is Lilith, Lady of Lament. This card is a main deck monster from the Layer of Darkness structure deck that allows you to tribute a dark monster, which could also be itself, to reveal 3 normal traps from your deck. Your opponent randomly gets to pick one, and then you get to set that card to your field. So this card was played in a really interesting deck that actually took 2 top spots at the LCS over the weekend. It was like Dogmatica, Eldritch Dragoon with some Shaddoll cards. It was like a 60 card build. It was really interesting and played some pretty cool trap cards in the main deck like Dinomischus, Ice Dragon's Prison, and Torrential Tribute, all of which can be brought out of the main deck using the effect of Lilith. Anyways, we are looking at Lilith here as a card that stood out of the deck, especially considering that it only has the 1 printing available from a structure deck that is a couple of years old at this point. Obviously, we've seen multiple times in the past where cards with only 1 structure deck printing can get quite expensive if they see meta usage, so Lilith is definitely something that we'll want to keep an eye on. We're going to be moving into a much slower format than the last one, so with traps being more viable now than before, Lilith is something to keep an eye on because it can tutor these powerful traps out of the deck for free. I'm a little bit concerned about this card potentially being reprinted as an OTS tournament pack common or a super rare, but outside of that, I don't really see where it could be reprinted anytime soon. If you can grab these for cheap, maybe only $1 or $2, I think they're a pretty safe hold. I'd see if you can at least get a set available for yourself and ready to use. And last but not least, we are taking a look at Sinister Shadow Games. It has been a really long time since this card has been meta viable. I think the last time we saw it see a lot of play was back in like the very early days of Shaddoll. However, in those 60 card Eldritch Dogmatica Dragoon decks that we just talked about topping the LCS, we saw a slightly bigger Shaddoll engine that could start to catch on with some players. Now in the OCG, we saw some people maining a copy of Ne Shaddoll Ariel, since you could dump App Cologne with Punishment, then use App Cologne to add and discard Ariel, which would trigger Ariel's effect, and basically lets you banish 3 cards from your opponent's graveyard for free, which is really cool. However, we actually saw this go a step further in these 60 card builds, which ran copies of Wendy, Beast, and 3 copies of Sinister Shadow Games, in addition to Schism and Ariel. This is cool because if you choose to add and discard the Wendy off of App Cologne, you can summon Beast out of the deck, then use Sinister Shadow Games to flip up the Beast and dump Ariel directly out of your deck, giving you access to that triple DD Crow, as well as Beast's flip effect, which lets you draw 2 cards and discard 1. It's a really cool combo overall, but you do need to hit the Sinister Shadow Games in order to pull it off effectively, which is why we saw Lilith bumped up a little bit in price as we just saw. I don't know if this is something that will actually make its way into a lot of different strategies, especially 40 card decks, right? Because it does require you to play like 4 bricks in the main deck, but the idea is really neat. Anyways, the ultra rare versions of Sinister Shadow Games aren't anything crazy yet, but they are up from the $1 or so they were at before to $2 to $3 each now. It does have just the 2 ultra rare printings, one from Duelist Alliance and then one from the Megatins. Now this card does also have a common printing from the Shaddoll structure deck that you can grab for like 25 cents or something like that, which is a big part of why the ultra rare hasn't spiked up as high in price as it could have. Overall, I wouldn't go out of your way to pick up a ton of extra copies of this card, but it is worth grabbing if you can get the ultras from someone's binder for maybe $1 or so, or make note of any that you guys have lying around and set them out of your bulk just in case. Alright guys, that is it for today's Market Watch episode. I know a lot of these cards seemed really random, but that's one of the great things about being in a new format under a new ban list. Seeing all of these changes from the Dragon Link or Infernobles that we've been seeing for the last little while has definitely breathed some new life into the game, and I'm excited to see what sort of techs and stuff people are able to come up with next. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's episode, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me and let me know that you enjoyed it. Also make sure that you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what else is going on with the market that maybe I missed or didn't cover in today's episode, so I can cover it in a future episode to keep you guys as informed as possible. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button for all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.